What if I told you there's an angel so terrifying that simply looking at his face can kill you instantly? This isn't mythology or folklore. This is biblical reality. The angel of death is the most feared being in all of creation, so horrifying that even other angels refuse to look directly at him. His appearance is so overwhelming that mortal minds cannot process what they're seeing without shutting down completely. In one night, he ended 185,000 lives without lifting a finger, just by being present. He has 12 wings that block out the sun, eyes like burning fire that see into souls, and a voice that can stop hearts from beating. But here's what's truly chilling. This terrifying being serves God directly, carrying out divine judgment with absolute precision. Today, I'm going to reveal what this angel actually looks like, why his appearance is lethal to humans, and the shocking biblical accounts of his deadly manifestations. Warning: what you're about to learn about God's most terrifying servant will change how you see divine justice forever. If you're ready to discover the truth that most churches are afraid to teach, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We're about to enter the darkest corner of biblical reality. Before we dive into the horrifying details, we need to understand that the angel of death isn't some modern horror invention. He's documented throughout biblical history, appearing in moments when God's judgment falls upon the earth. The Bible first mentions this terrifying being in Exodus during the original Passover. Exodus 12 verse 23 says, "When the Lord goes through the land to strike down the Egyptians, he will see the blood on the top and sides of the doorframe and will pass over that doorway, and he will not permit the destroyer to enter your houses and strike you down." Notice that word, destroyer. This isn't just death. This is active, purposeful destruction carried out by a being so terrible that even God acknowledges his devastating power. But the most detailed and chilling account comes from 2 Kings 19 verse 35. That night the angel of the Lord went out and put to death 185,000 in the Assyrian camp. When the people got up the next morning, there were all the dead bodies. Think about that image for a moment. 185,000 elite soldiers, warriors who had conquered nations, all dead in their tents. No wounds, no signs of battle, no indication of disease. Just death. But here's what the Bible doesn't tell you. Ancient historians who recorded this event described something far more disturbing. According to these accounts, the soldiers' faces were frozen in expressions of absolute terror. Their eyes were wide open but had turned completely white, as if they had seen something so horrifying it literally drained the life from their bodies. Some were found clutching their chests, suggesting their hearts had simply stopped from sheer fear. This wasn't just death. This was death by divine terror. In 1 Chronicles 21 verse 16, we get another glimpse. David looked up and saw the angel of the Lord standing between heaven and earth, with a drawn sword in his hand extended over Jerusalem. But what's interesting is what happens next. Even David, a man after God's own heart, a warrior who had faced giants, falls face down in terror. This pattern repeats throughout Scripture. Every time humans encounter this angel, the reaction is the same. Overwhelming, paralyzing fear that often leads to death. To understand why looking at the angel of death is lethal, we need to explore what makes his appearance so fundamentally wrong to human perception. From a psychological perspective, humans are hardwired to recognize faces and forms that make sense within our understanding of reality. We can process beauty, ugliness, even moderate deformity. But the angel of death's appearance violates every category our minds use to interpret visual information. Imagine trying to run modern software on hardware from the 1980s. The system would crash immediately. That's what happens when a human brain tries to process the angel of death's true form. Our neural pathways simply cannot handle what they're seeing. But this isn't a design flaw, it's intentional. God created this angel with an appearance so terrible, so beyond human comprehension, that it serves as the ultimate expression of divine judgment. This angel doesn't need to physically harm anyone because his form itself is a weapon that no human defense can withstand. The Bible gives us clues about what makes his appearance so devastating. In Revelation 9 verse 11, he's called Apollyon and Abaddon, names that mean destroyer and destruction. But these aren't just titles. They describe the effect his very presence has on creation itself. Ancient texts describe him as having 12 wings, each one covered in eyes that burn like fire. But these aren't beautiful eyes like other angels possess. They're described as windows into the void, showing not light but the absolute absence of all hope and life. His face is said to be perfect in its proportions, yet so terrible that it represents the complete inversion of everything humans associate with divine beauty. Where other angels radiate light and joy, he radiates in darkness so profound it seems to pull light itself into nothingness. His voice, when he speaks, doesn't just produce sound, it produces frequency vibrations that disrupt the human nervous system at a cellular level. Those who have heard it describe it as the sound of endings, not music, but the complete absence of all harmony and peace. This is why looking at him kills. It's not that he actively murders those who see him. Their own minds and bodies shut down when confronted with something so far beyond their capacity to understand. Let's examine the most frightening aspects of his appearance, starting with those 12 wings that ancient texts describe in terrifying detail. Unlike the beautiful wings of cherubim or seraphim, the angel of death's wings serve a completely different purpose. They don't lift him up, they block out hope itself. When fully extended, his wingspan is said to cover the horizon, literally blotting out the sun and casting entire regions into shadow. But it's not just their size that makes them terrifying. Each wing is covered in what appear to be eyes, but closer examination reveals these aren't organs of sight. They're portals. Ancient descriptions suggest that looking into these eyes shows the viewer their own death played out in excruciating detail. The wings move with a sound that's been described as the rustle of ending things, not the whoosh of air, but the subtle sound of life itself being extinguished. When he flies, those below report hearing the sounds of their own final moments. Their last heartbeat, their last breath, their last word. The feathers of his wings are said to be black, but not the black of night or shadow. They're described as the black of never was, a color that represents not just the absence of light, but the absence of possibility itself. When the angel of death spreads his wings over a city, ancient accounts tell us that plants begin to wither, animals flee in terror, and even the bravest humans feel an inexplicable urge to hide. It's as if creation itself recognizes the presence of its ultimate judge. But perhaps most disturbing of all is what happens when his wings fold. The shadow they cast doesn't disappear gradually like normal shadows. It snaps away instantly, leaving those who were beneath it with the permanent knowledge that they have stood in the presence of their own mortality. This is why the Assyrian soldiers died. They didn't just see the angel of death. They were covered by his shadow, and their minds simply could not process the reality of standing beneath wings that represented the end of all things. Now we come to the most terrifying aspect of the angel of death, his face. This is what kills humans who look upon him, and understanding why requires us to delve into the darkest corners of divine design. The angel of death's face is described as perfect in its proportions, every feature mathematically flawless, arranged in perfect symmetry. But this perfection is what makes it so deadly. It's the perfection of ending, the ultimate expression of finality made visible. His eyes are perhaps the most disturbing feature. They don't reflect light like normal eyes. They absorb it. Looking into them is like staring into the heat death of the universe, seeing the moment when all energy ceases and all motion stops. They show not just your death, but the death of everything you've ever loved, everyone you've ever known, and every hope you've ever held. Ancient texts describe his gaze as the stare of absolute conclusion. When he looks at someone, they don't just see their own mortality, they experience it. Their mind is flooded with the sensory experience of dying, the feeling of their heart stopping, their breath failing, their consciousness fading. But instead of lasting moments, this experience stretches into what feels like eternity. His expression never changes. It's not cruel or angry or sad. It's completely neutral, which makes it infinitely more terrifying. This is the face of absolute judgment, without mercy or malice, simply the execution of divine will. It's the expression of someone for whom ending life is not emotional but procedural. But here's what makes his face truly lethal. It forces viewers to confront the absolute reality of their own finite existence in a way the human mind is not designed to handle. We live our lives with carefully constructed psychological barriers that protect us from truly comprehending our mortality. His face strips away every one of those barriers simultaneously. When someone looks at the angel of death, they don't just understand that they will die. They experience the full weight of what death actually means. The complete cessation of consciousness, the end of all sensation, the total dissolution of self. It's not the peaceful crossing over that people like to imagine. It's the stark reality of absolute nothingness. This complete confrontation with mortality triggers what psychologists might call acute existential shock. The human nervous system simply cannot process this level of existential terror and shuts down to protect itself. But by then, it's too late. If his appearance wasn't terrifying enough, the angel of death's voice adds another dimension of lethality to his presence. This isn't just sound. It's the audio manifestation of ending itself. When the angel of death speaks, his voice operates on frequencies that directly interfere with human biological functions. Ancient accounts describe it as the sound of silence becoming complete, not loud or harsh, but utterly final in a way that makes all other sounds seem meaningless. Those who have heard his voice report that it doesn't just enter their ears. It seems to speak directly to their cells, telling them to stop functioning. Hearts begin to beat irregularly. Breathing becomes labored, and neural activity starts to slow down. It's as if the very atoms of their body recognize the authority in his voice and begin preparing to cease. But the psychological effect is even more devastating than the physical one. His voice carries with it the complete certainty of judgment. When he speaks, listeners don't just hear words. They hear the final verdict on their existence. There's no appeal, no negotiation, no hope of reprieve. His voice is the sound of decisions that cannot be changed. Ancient texts describe different tones his voice can take, each one deadly in its own way. The whisper of completion, so quiet it can barely be heard, but it carries the message that your time is finished. Those who hear this whisper report that it echoes in their minds for days before their hearts simply stop beating. The declaration of ending, spoken at normal volume, but with such finality that listeners immediately understand their mortality in the most visceral way possible. This usually causes immediate cardiac arrest from shock. The command of cessation, a direct order for life to end. This is what the 185,000 Assyrian soldiers heard. Their bodies simply obeyed the command before their minds could even process what was happening. But perhaps most terrifying of all is when he speaks your name. Ancient accounts tell us that when the angel of death calls someone by name, their very identity begins to dissolve. They start to forget who they are, what they've accomplished, who they love. Their sense of self unravels completely before their body follows suit. This is why biblical accounts often mention people dying of fear when encountering divine messengers. It's not just the shock of seeing something supernatural. It's the very real physiological response to sounds that the human body interprets as commands to stop living. I need to pause here for a moment. If learning about God's most terrifying servant is opening your eyes to biblical truths you've never encountered before, you need to make sure you don't miss what's coming next. Hit that subscribe button right now and ring the notification bell, because we publish revelations like this every week. Hidden biblical truths, ancient mysteries, and divine realities that most churches are afraid to discuss. We're about to explore why God created such a terrifying being, and how this angel's existence reveals something shocking about the nature of divine justice itself. Now we come to the most disturbing question of all. Why would a loving God create a being so terrifying that simply looking at him causes death? The answer reveals something about divine justice that most people aren't prepared to understand. God didn't create the angel of death to be cruel or vindictive. He created him to be the perfect expression of absolute justice without mercy. Think about it this way. Throughout human history, we've seen justice corrupted by emotion, mercy, personal interest, and human weakness. Even our best attempts at fair judgment are tainted by our limitations. But divine justice cannot be compromised by these human frailties. The angel of death represents justice in its purest form, completely impartial, absolutely final, and utterly without the possibility of corruption. When God needs judgment executed with perfect precision, he sends the one being who cannot be influenced by pleading, bribery, emotion, or personal relationships. This angel serves as the ultimate reminder that God's justice is not like human justice. It doesn't consider circumstances, make exceptions, or offer second chances when the time for mercy has passed. It simply is. But here's what makes this even more chilling. The angel of death is not evil. He's completely good in his perfect obedience to God's will. He takes no pleasure in destruction, feels no anger toward his targets, and experiences no satisfaction in their fear. He simply carries out his assigned role with absolute precision. This perfect obedience makes him more terrifying than any demon could ever be. Demons act from evil motivation, which means they can be unpredictable, potentially merciful, or even converted. But the angel of death acts from perfect goodness, which means he is completely predictable, utterly unmerciful in his role, and absolutely unchangeable in his purpose. Ancient texts suggest that he was created before humanity, as part of God's original plan for creation. This means that death, and the terrifying reality of divine judgment, was always part of the design. It wasn't added after the fall. It was built into the very structure of existence itself. This raises profound questions about the nature of divine love. How can the same God who loves humanity also create something so terrifying? The answer lies in understanding that God's love includes perfect justice, and perfect justice sometimes requires consequences so absolute that mercy becomes irrelevant. The angel of death serves as the ultimate enforcement mechanism for divine law. He ensures that when God declares something finished, it is truly finished. When divine patience runs out, when mercy has been offered and rejected, when judgment becomes necessary, he is the one who carries it out with perfect, terrifying efficiency. You might think that the angel of death belongs only to ancient history, but reports of encounters with this terrifying being continue even today. Of course, most people who truly see him don't survive to tell about it, but there are documented cases of near encounters that reveal his continued activity in our world. Medical professionals have reported mysterious deaths where patients suddenly develop expressions of absolute terror moments before dying, despite showing no signs of distress just minutes earlier. These cases often involve people who claim to see something standing at the foot of the bed that others cannot perceive. In several documented instances, hospital staff have noted dramatic drops in room temperature and an overwhelming sense of dread that causes even experienced nurses to feel compelled to leave the area. When they return, the patient has died with their eyes wide open and their face frozen in an expression of indescribable fear. But perhaps most disturbing are the reports from people who claim to have glimpsed him and survived. These accounts are remarkably consistent despite coming from different cultures and time periods. They describe seeing a figure of perfect proportions whose presence immediately fills them with terror beyond anything they've ever experienced. Most report that they only saw him for a split second before fainting or becoming unconscious, which likely saved their lives. Those who've had these near encounters report lasting psychological effects. They develop an acute awareness of mortality that never leaves them. Many become unable to function normally because they've seen firsthand the reality of what awaits every human being. Some describe nightmares where they see him more clearly, and these dreams often coincide with the deaths of people they know. It's as if having glimpsed him once creates a permanent connection that allows them to sense when he's near. But here's what's truly chilling. Several of these survivors report that during their brief encounter, they felt certain that he was aware of them, that he looked directly at them and made a conscious choice not to complete his task. This suggests that some people are marked for later appointment rather than immediate judgment. Modern technology has even captured strange phenomena during unexplained deaths, electromagnetic anomalies, temperature fluctuations, and audio recordings of sounds that don't match any known natural phenomena. While we can't prove these are connected to the angel of death, the patterns are disturbingly consistent with ancient descriptions of his presence. The most frightening modern accounts come from people who work in hospices or emergency rooms. Some report seeing a shadow figure that appears just before certain deaths, not the peaceful deaths, but the ones where patients suddenly become terrified of something no one else can see. These medical professionals often develop what they call the knowledge, an inexplicable ability to sense when someone is about to die not from medical causes, but from something else entirely. They describe it as feeling the presence of absolute ending in the room. Given the reality of this terrifying being, you might wonder, is there any protection? Can anything shield us from an encounter with the angel of death? The biblical answer is both comforting and sobering. The angel of death operates under divine authority, which means he cannot act outside of God's will. This provides the ultimate protection, living in right relationship with God. The original Passover gives us the clearest example of protection. The Israelites were instructed to mark their doorframes with lamb's blood, and the destroyer passed over their homes. This wasn't because the blood itself had power, but because it represented obedience to God's instructions and faith in his protection. Throughout biblical history, we see that the angel of death's victims are those who have placed themselves under divine judgment through rebellion, wickedness, or direct opposition to God's will. The 185,000 Assyrian soldiers died because they were actively attacking God's people. Pharaoh's firstborn died because Pharaoh refused to obey God's commands. But there are warning signs that suggest his presence is near. Ancient texts and modern accounts describe consistent phenomena that precede his manifestation. A sudden, inexplicable drop in temperature that penetrates to the bone. Animals becoming agitated and trying to flee the area. The sensation of being watched by something that wishes you harm. An overwhelming feeling of dread that seems to come from outside yourself rather than from your own emotions. More specifically, people report seeing shadows that move independently of any light source, hearing whispers in languages they don't understand, and experiencing the feeling that time itself is slowing down or stopping entirely. However, it's crucial to understand that fearing the angel of death is different from fearing death itself. Death is inevitable for all humans, but an encounter with this particular angel represents something far more specific, divine judgment executed with terrifying precision. The ultimate protection comes from understanding that God's justice, while absolute and sometimes terrifying, is also perfectly fair. The angel of death doesn't come for those who are covered by divine mercy, but for those who have exhausted that mercy through their own choices. This doesn't mean living in constant fear, but rather living with proper reverence for the reality of divine justice and the importance of remaining under God's protection. The angel of death represents one of the most terrifying realities in all of biblical teaching, the existence of divine justice so pure and absolute that it transcends human understanding and literally cannot be survived by mortal beings. His appearance is lethal not because he's evil, but because he's the perfect expression of divine judgment. His voice stops hearts not from malice, but from the sheer authority of absolute truth. His presence brings death not through violence, but through the simple reality that some beings are too holy, too terrible, too perfect in their purpose for human existence to endure. But understanding this angel reveals something crucial about the nature of God's justice and mercy. The same divine authority that created this terrifying being also provides protection from him through grace, obedience, and right relationship. But there's so much more to this story. Did you know that the angel of death has a counterpart? Another angel whose job is to comfort those who are dying peacefully? And there are accounts of battles between these two beings over individual souls, determining whether someone experiences terrifying judgment or peaceful transition. In our next video, we're going to explore the angel of mercy, the being who stands opposite the angel of death and fights for the souls of those who are caught between divine justice and divine grace. Click on the video appearing on your screen right now to discover how these two cosmic forces battle over human souls, and how you can ensure you're on the right side when your time comes. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell, because we're committed to revealing the biblical truths that most people never discover, no matter how shocking or frightening they might be. Until next time, remember, divine justice is real, divine mercy is available, and the choice between them is ultimately yours to make.